Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Bad Boys Ride or Die, number 2 would be The Watchers, number 3 would be Garfield, number 4 would be If, and number 5 would be Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. And I only got 1 out of 5 of my predictions right for this weekend. Unfortunately, nobody else got their predictions right as well this weekend. The Watchers did not do as well as I was kind of hoping it would, and a couple other movies, rearranged, and one that I predicted is not in the top 5. It got close, but no cigar, as they will sometimes say. Let's go over what happened in the overall top 10. Big weekend, because this was kind of like the rejuvenation of the box office. For a while, it was kind of like, I don't know, we've been getting a lot of just box office disappointment stories, and I just don't know. But this weekend with Bad Boys Ride or Die screeching in here at number 1, it made $56 million on its opening weekend. Now, this is on a budget of $100 million. That's the initial production budget. It's only $10 million higher than the budget for Life, if I remember correctly. That one was $90 million. And worldwide, it is opened up to $104 million. So this isn't like to compare to another Sony release recently, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, where both of these movies cost $100 million, but the thing about Frozen Empire is that they had a solid debut if they could go on to have solid word of mouth and not much competition. Unfortunately, that was just not the case, and they only recently barely crossed over the doubling point. But with an opening like this for Ride or Die, already getting the initial production budget back, that is a great sign. There's already just positive word of mouth over the movie itself, but also the fact that it did get number 1, the fact that people are kind of talking up this narrative of like, look what came in to save the box office when it was at its most dour, Bad Boys. So that could carry over into the next couple weeks. Even with Inside Out 2 coming out, I feel like this movie will still hold over pretty well, and even then, it's already on track to, make its money back, double its budget, and be in the right lane, So that is really exciting for this. For the Bad Boys franchise, the opening was $6 million below Bad Boys for Life. That was the franchise high as far as opening weekends. That being said, it is still over the other 2 films. The opening weekend was $10 million over Bad Boys 2 and $41 million over the original. So these new Bad Boys films that we are getting, it still has the fans from the old days, but it is still bringing in, that money. It's not like, well, we only have this specific kind of audience. It's like, no, we've got so many people that are interested in seeing new Bad Boys movies, which is exciting. Shows in the opening weekends. It'll show for the overall domestic and worldwide runs. For the franchise, it needs $9 million until it outgrosses the original film. That's the lowest grossing Bad Boys film, so they're already about to clear that one, and then they're on their way for the rest. Worldwide, like I said, $104 million, so they need $37 million until they outgross the original, which is also the lowest grossing one worldwide. So there you go, Ride or Die, coming on in here and saving the day. Obviously, that is fantastic to see. I kind of knew last weekend, like, yeah, it's going to be number 1, and I think it will, do well, but just seeing these numbers and actually, like, analyzing it right here with the production budget is this, and the worldwide total was this, and, it got like a decent, critic reviews. Like, it was kind of like, some people prefer For Life, some people are still entertained by this movie, but audiences are really loving this. Cinema Score gave it an A-. Will Smith showed up and watched the movie with audiences and surprised them at the end, and, got to see that excitement. People are still buzzing about this. So I think this will still have a pretty solid life. I know Inside Out 2 is next week, and there's a couple other June movies, like A Quiet Place Day 1 will come out at some point, but I think this will have a pretty good life, in the theaters. And, obviously it helps that, like I said, it just made back its initial production budget in its opening weekend. That is pretty stellar. And it also goes to show you that some people were putting out articles going like, are audiences ready to forgive Will Smith for the slap? That shit was 2 years ago. I don't think anyone gives a shit anymore, to be honest. You know what I mean? I genuinely, people who still like really deeply care about the slap, honestly, just get over it. It's done. It happened. He got banned from the Oscars for 10 years. Chris Rock got to do his clapback stand-up special. We're done. It's over. We don't need to keep bringing this up. It's fine. Look at this. People are still buzzing to see Will Smith movie. Because that was the prediction, of course, from some doomsdayers. Like, are people ready to forgive Will Smith? It might be a big flop. No. It's fucking Bad Boys. It's gonna do well. So there you go. Good stuff all around. Number 2 was the Garfield movie, holding on still pretty well. Obviously, these weekends with Garfield have not been like the biggest things you've ever seen, but there have been solid holds. And, it is a family film, so families will come back to it, It made $10 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $68 million. So it needs $7 million until it outgrosses the Bill Murray original. Worldwide, it is sitting at $192 million, so it needs $16 million until it outgrosses the original film. At that point, it'll be the highest grossing theatrically released Garfield film. So there you go. I think there is like a really big misconception because it was kind of lumped in with Furiosa as like, this is the worst Memorial Day opening weekend thing. I feel like there's been a big misconception as far as, well, that means both of them are flops. And Garfield, we'll talk about Furiosa in a second. We'll catch you up on those details. But the thing about it is like, yeah, that was the worst Memorial Day weekend in like history. However, Garfield on a budget of $60 million has tripled that at this point and is on its way to quadruple it if it gets to $240 million, which it's looking like it will. This movie, it may not be making the biggest numbers of all time. It may not be making peak Pixar box office history or anything like that, but or even Illumination, but it is still doing pretty well, you know what I mean? So let's not just immediately call something a flop just because on its opening weekend, it didn't do that great, and then you never look at any other stats or how it's doing, You can call something a flop if you, like The Fall Guy. If you've been watching The Fall Guy, like I have, and how it will never double its $125 million budget, then you can call that a flop. You're well justified and well read to make that call. Number 3 is If, making $8 million, adding to a domestic total of $93 million for Krasinski. That is $67 million away from A Quiet Place Part 2. Worldwide, it is sitting at $160 million, which is $136 million away from A Quiet Place Part 2. This, like we've been talking about, the budget was $110 million, and so it technically needs to get to $220 million to be considered a success by our standards. $60 million away from doing so. It's been having decent holds, similar to Garfield recently. It's been having decent holds ever since it premiered, and it is a family film, so that's why, instead of the watchers being up here, If and Garfield were able to have their holds slip over it. But still, it's like, it's like a slow crawl, where Garfield, it was like, yeah, the budget was low enough, and it had a solid enough debut to, keep it going, and worldwide especially. If is kind of, it's having a bit of a harder time, So, yeah, decent hold, and, it'll go to show you that people are willing to go to the theaters and take their families. May not be immediately, may not be the opening weekend, and we have to stop judging a movie's performance just by its opening weekend. That being said, this one is still not in the best position. Number 4 was The Watchers. I don't have a budget for this thing, unfortunately. I'm assuming it's not completely indie. There's some special effects shots in there, but I'm also going to assume it's not like the biggest budgeted thing in the world. Either way, opening with $7 million isn't the best, especially when the worldwide total only adds up to $11 million. This is, of course, Ashana Night Shyamalan's directorial feature debut. She's directed some episodes of Apple TV's show Servant, which is a pretty good mystery horror show if you want to check that out. The only stats that I can really bring up, since this is her debut in the feature films, is bringing up that this is a Blinding Edge production, which is M. Night Shyamalan's production company. So we're just going to look at some stats for Blinding Edge Pictures, which is not very good. As far as opening weekends, this is the lowest that they've ever had. It is $7 million below Knock at the Cabin, which was their previous lowest one, M. Night Shyamalan's most recent film, before Trapped later this year, and it also needs $28 million until it outgrosses Knock at the Cabin domestically. So they're starting off on the lowest point, and they're probably not going to reach that point. You know what I mean? This production company was also established when Unbreakable came out, so it doesn't really apply to The Sixth Sense or M. Night's other 2 films that came before that. We're just talking about this company ever since they started, which, according to the numbers, starts with Unbreakable stats. And it's on the very low end. Worldwide, like I said, 11 million, so it needs 43 million until it outgrosses Knock at the Cabin. The fact that it opened this low and the word of mouth isn't great on this thing, the cinema score was pretty low and the Rotten Tomatoes score, obviously, it just doesn't seem to be that kind of movie that is catching on and people are going to spread the word on so it can have like a decent kind of hold. It just unfortunately seems like, I hope to be wrong just because I would like to see, more movies be successful. It just seems like it might be one of those movies that will dip out of here pretty quickly. You know what I mean? So a bit of a bummer, but she'll be fine. The director will be fine because she's a Nepo baby, technically. Trap later this year. I'm sure that'll be I'm sure that'll do well. I don't know how much that one costs, though. Either way, it doesn't matter. We're not there yet. Number 5 was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, making $5 million, adding to a domestic total of $149 million. It has officially outgrossed domestically War for the Planet of the Apes just by $3 million. It now needs $27 million until it outgrosses Rise of the Planet of the Apes. If the holdovers are, enough to make that $27 million, great. It's been kind of, slowing down ever since it premiered, I think, about a month ago at this point. It's about that point. Anyways, we might see it happen. If not, it's still outgrossed War, which is pretty solid. Worldwide, it is now sitting at $359 million, and it's also $3 million away from outgrossing the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, which is an achievement in and of itself. Like we've discussed, it already has doubled its $160 million initial production budget. It's made $39 million over that at this point. Who knows? It doesn't seem like it's now going to triple this budget. It would need to get to $480 million to do so. I'm going to hope that this total is enough to keep some interest here for this franchise to keep it going. From what I can remember, it doesn't look like IMDb had any other places listed as far as its release, so its rollout is done, it seems like. So it's kind of just, taking up anything else it can get, and any other success it may have may be the streaming numbers when it hits like premium video on demand, or when it hits Blu-ray, if people are still going to buy Blu-rays. So we'll see, you know what I mean? I'm hoping this is a solid enough, kind of hold to ensure 20th Century to keep, making these movies this way, keep following the storyline instead of pivoting into something cheaper or worse. But we'll see, you know what I mean? I feel like this had a good word of mouth, just as far as, well, critically, pretty good word of mouth, audiences, but also just as far as like how it was doing at the box office. Just, they're kind of notorious, these movies, at least the most recent Andy Serkis films. They're kind of notorious for like quietly kind of making bank. So we'll see if this is enough. Number 6 is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. This one dipping out of the top 5. This is one that, Garfield is holding over well if, has a solid enough hold, even if it's not financially successful. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, same thing as Garfield, saw enough hold. Furiosa is just dipping. It is not having the best kind of holds, which is so unfortunate. No good amount of Hideo Kojima posts on Twitter can save this movie, it seems like, which is such a bummer. This movie made $4 million this weekend, which now adds to a domestic total of $58 million, places it $95 million away from Fury Road. Worldwide, it is sitting at $144 million, which places it $225 million away from Fury Road. It needs $24 million until they cross over the initial production budget of $168 million. But obviously it needs a way lot more to double that and even to be considered a success, because, sometimes they need, money that they don't disclose. It's not as simple as just doubling it. That's just the ballpark estimate for our show. So yeah, it's still a continued bummer, but, Bad Boys came out and that did well. So there you go. Number 7 is The Fall Guy, making $2.7 million, adding to a domestic total of $85 million for David Leitch. It needs $18 million until it outgrosses Bullet Train. Worldwide, it is sitting at $165 million, and it needs $73 million until it outgrosses Bullet Train. I have nothing else to add here that isn't just repeating the same things I have been saying about this movie. And also, I kind of talked about it earlier when I mentioned Garfield earlier, so I think we can just move along. Sorry, The Fall Guy. Number 8, a re-release, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This one actually did pretty well, making $2.4 million, adding to a domestic total of $317 million. Worldwide, it is now sitting at $893 million. And if you think that's all The Lord of the Rings you're going to get in this top 10, too bad, bitch. Number 9, Two Towers, the other re-release, is also in the top 10 here. That is quite spectacular. I didn't see these re-releases, but someone out there is, and that's pretty good, Made $1.9 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $344 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $921. So although these ones didn't crack the top 5, it's still, made it into the top 10, and with these numbers, that is pretty good. We will see, I guess Return of the King will be next weekend. I don't think that'll get into the top 5, obviously, but we will see if it does the same thing as these two. It does pretty good business. And then finally, closing out the video, number 10, The Strangers Chapter 1, making $1.8 million, adding to a domestic total of $32 million, so that places it $20 million away from the original film. Worldwide, it is sitting at $36 million, so they have officially outgrossed The Strangers Prey at Night by $4 million, but it needs $47 million until it outgrosses the original film. Obviously, since it's about to leave the top 10, that's not happening. But hey, it made some money on this 8.5 million initial production budget. You know, they were able to make some kind of money. At this point, they have quadrupled it by looking at the in total worldwide numbers. They have quadrupled that 8.5 at this point. So, you know, not a huge hit, but like a modest low budget success. You know, they can release the other 2 chapters and, you know, pray to God that they can make more money. If it's like diminishing returns, that'll be the worst. You know what I mean? The best case scenario for the rest of this trilogy is that 2 makes more money and then 3 makes more money. Or even if 2 makes more money and then 3 doesn't do as much, at least you've made more money. If it's like this one made 36 million in total, but then the second one didn't, and then the third one didn't even do the second one's numbers, then that's the worst case scenario. You know what I mean? That was like an experiment that failed for them. Anyways, now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. I think it's going to be pretty easy, I guess. I mean, you know, with the way these movies switch around, you never know, but let's just dive into it. Number 1, I think, will be Inside Out 2. And then there's not a lot of other new releases coming out that are like going to be this wide release as Inside Out 2. There's a lot of like more kind of niche films that are like marketed towards a specific kind of audience member or specific audience members know about, and then everyone else is just like, well, what's the big one? Oh, Inside Out 2, got it. You know, they don't care to explore, they don't care about anything else. Number 2, I think, will be Bad Boys Ride or Die. Number 3, the Garfield movie. Number 4, If, and number 5, The Watchers. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.